YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with another 7-round mock draft, and this one is for the Atlanta Falcons. Going through every single team in draft order, so we'll eventually get to the teams at the end there. We have regular mock drafts, all kinds of draft coverage. We had free agency coverage on the channel, all kinds of fun stuff here. So the Falcons got 9 picks. I don't think they need it. They don't have a bunch of needs really. They just got to stay healthy. Could use some things here and there. Obviously, that's what the draft's for, but they don't have some glaring needs all over the place like some teams do, so they're in pretty good shape. You just got to stay healthy. Right before we get started here, follow our Twitter, link in the description, as well as our Instagram and Patreon. Extra content on all of those. Moving on, Falcons, first pick. I have them taking Ed Oliver. I think this is probably the furthest he can drop, and he may drop because you got the quarterbacks flying up there. Maybe some of the other pass rushers, how important pass rush is. So teams will overdraft quarterbacks in pass rush. So the D lineman, even though Ed Oliver, he can bring a pass rush as a D lineman. But I think he can drop a little bit. He doesn't have a ton of production where he came from. You expect a little more playing for Houston, but he's a dominant player, freakish player, a lot of potential. And I think this is the furthest he'll drop, and I don't think the Falcons would pass on him. And I think it's very realistic at this point, just because, like I said, people are coming up, reaching for the quarterbacks, the pass rushers these days. So, very possible. On to the next pick, I'm going to corner. I had him taking Julian Love from Notre Dame, which I think will help him in the slot right away. But Julian Love can play outside. His best, he's just best in the short game. But down the sideline, he's very good as well. So he can play outside corner, but I think he steps in and helps the Falcons in the slot. The Falcons already have 2 outside starting corners, but they definitely could use a slot guy, and they can use some depth at the position too. You never can have enough corners, and sometimes it's good to have somewhat of a rotation in there. So Love should be a lock in the second round. And, the last 2 years, he's the top of the NCAA in pass deflection, so he knows how to attack the ball. So the Falcons would love to have him in the second round. Moving on to the next pick, I'm taking O'Shane Ximines from Old Dominion. Another spot where they don't really need starting pass rushers. They have Vic Beasley and Takkarist McKinley's. He's going to break out one of these years. He's already been pretty solid. And Ximines, I think, is a Dan Quinn type of guy, a guy that can play end. He has the strength to play end, but he can step off the ball. That's kind of what McKinley and Beasley were. They were kind of guys that can play both 3-4, 4-3. It's the type of guys that he likes. So Ximines, and he's got some strength to him too. So I think they would like him as a rotation. It's very important to have the pass rush rotation. And like I said, they have 2 starters there, but they really do not have depth, and it's very important for them to have depth, and they don't really know if Vic Beasley is part of their long-term future quite yet. So they definitely need a guy. I think in the second round they would also like L.J. Collier from TCU. I think they could be interested in him in the second round, but I went with this scenario with this 7-round mock. Moving on to the next pick for the Falcons, Ben Powers from Oklahoma. That whole Oklahoma offensive line is just ridiculous, and they're in this draft class too. They're the top offensive line in the country for a reason, and Ben Powers, I think, can play guard for them. They may be set at their offensive line in terms of starters. So, this could be depth right away, but near future starter possibly. So, you gotta have the depth of the offensive line too. So, like I said, I think the Falcons got starters pretty much everywhere. Obviously would like a starter in the earlier rounds, which they could get here. But at this point, we're just going for some very solid depth and guys that could push for a starting job earlier in their career. Next pick is Foster Moreau, who I think get a bunch of playing time if they took him. He's moving on up the boards here. Very athletic tight end, can block too. I think he goes later round 4 for the Falcons. It's potentially they can get him here, and they do have Hooper, but you could use another guy there, maybe a more athletic guy in there, I think, and that's what you get from Foster Moreau here in the 4th round. Next pick, I am taking Jamel Dean, corner from Auburn. Like I said, they have 2 starting corners. They can plug Julian Love in the slot spot, but then they don't really have depth at the outside corner position, really no depth at all. So Jamel Dean is a guy that can plug in there, and they can use the rotation. He's had a bad knee injury. Other than that, he's a very solid corner, better than a round 5 guy. Because the injury scare, he drops down a little bit. But if he's part of rotation, that could be very good. He can make big plays for you, and he's not constantly on the field there, but he's there for the future as well. So I definitely think they need corner depth, guys for the future there. Next pick, Gary Johnson, linebacker from Texas. Another guy that maybe will start off as a depth guy. He's a freakish athlete. And I think Dan Quinn will like a guy like that. You know, it could be like a Deion Jones. Not a similar style play as Deion Jones, but since, you know, he was a freakish guy down in these rounds low earlier, but then I think it's a guy they may want to work with. You know, Gary Johnson, you know, tore up the combine, and he potentially could be an outside linebacker for them in the near future. Next pick, Terry Godwin from Georgia. You know, I think they could definitely use another slot receiver, and since the receiver class is so good, guys like Godwin will get pushed down to here. So usually, you know, in a normal class, he'd probably be a 4th-round pick, but I think it's possible you can get him down here, and they definitely can use him in the slot. He also can play outside. He just knows how to get open. He knows how to get open here. So definitely could use a guy like that. You know, they're pretty set on their top outside receivers, and Ridley can play in the slot too. So that's good, but I think it's worth a pick down here if he's sitting here in round 6. And their last pick, I have them taking Nate Harvey. You know, just a recent guy we're hearing about because he was supposed to go back to school, and then something, not sure exactly, but something happened there where he wasn't eligible to go back, and then they let him join the NFL draft. And, you know, he's probably worth a better pick than round 7, but it's so last second. You know, teams know they don't have, you know, the proper evaluations on this guy, and I'm sure they can get access to that, and they ain't really get to meet with him. He wasn't at the combine, any kind of workout so far. So I think teams know that, and I think they'll know that they can wait on a guy like this. But he has some upside here, and like I said, they really have no depth at the pass rush position, and that's what this is here. But he has some upside, and I think his talent is better than round 7. But he's more of the true DN in my opinion. You know, they got some of those guys that can step back. Harvey can, but you know, I think they need a guy like this in the rotation as well. So that's going to do it for the Falcons 7-round mock. Again, we're doing all the teams. Don't worry. We're going in draft order eventually. We'll get through all of them. Plenty of regular NFL draft content, regular mock drafts, other NFL draft content. We did a bunch of free agency content during free agency there and just kind of recapped it. Got our biggest winners, best signings, videos like that. So check any of that out if you haven't quite yet. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. 20K is our subscriber goal. Click that like button. We much appreciate it as well. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.